Bueno. Alright. If there's anybody here, I'm just sending out some messages on some social medias and stuff that I've gone live on this and kind of what it's about. See if we can't get some folks in here and have a discussion. All right, getting things set up. This is weird because eventually this will just publish itself as an entire video, but there's not really anything to do until somebody comes and talks because it's supposed to be a discussion. It's really hard to have a discussion with yourself. I suppose I could just ramble about some of the broader strokes of the issues, so anybody who might watch this later can have a bit of pre-understanding before they see what hopefully will be a lively discussion. So whenever it comes to artificial intelligence assistants and using them for creative pursuits, particularly writing and drawing, because we haven't really gotten to a point where animations or video or anything like that is of a quality that it's going to be impacting the industries, although I imagine it won't take very long until we get there. Um, so the issue that people are having is, well, there's a couple. Number one, there's a concern over copyright, and that concern over copyright comes from a couple of different directions. They are concerned that using AI models and training them off of existing works, and then using that training to create new works is sort of violating the copyrights of the artists that the training data was taken from. And then there's also concern about if we were to copyright AI generated materials, who would get the copyright? Does it belong to the people who own the model, like the OpenAI folks who own ChatGPT? Should they own the copyright to anything I generate on here? Should it go to the person who generated the prompts that ultimately created the output? Should we have no copyright because a human, quote unquote, wasn't involved in the creation? Or should the copyright in some way be handed down to those individuals who the training data was taken from to create the model that ultimately created the outputs? This conversation is much more vigorous in the area of illustration because I think it's a lot easier to see where the model is pulling its influence from. Just because even though a visual input, right, a picture, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words or whatever, even though it tends to put across more information, I think our brains are just structured in a way that makes it easier to associate similarity between images than it does necessarily between, just a mountain of text and the way that text is written. At least I've always found that it's easier to associate similarity between images. Um, so yeah, that's sort of the long and short of where that conversation is coming from. I guess one of the other big deals is we're talking about people potentially losing jobs. And I think this is the easiest one to sort of put at rest. It's my personal opinion that as a tool, this is one of those a rising tide raises all ships sort of situations. For example, when we invented the wheel and we no longer had to drag carts on skids, but instead had wheels, porters didn't suddenly lose their jobs moving loads around cities or from city to city or whatever it was they were doing. They just had the ability to move more and at greater speeds. But there was still a reliance on the individual capabilities of that person. Your strength, your own personal speed, uh, your even preparation skills for the journeys you were taking, right? If you were bringing enough water, enough shelter, enough food, all of these things mattered ultimately in the efficacy of that tool. And I think the same is extremely true of these AI assistants. And I think that's going to express itself um, as more and more professionals and experts start using the models. You're going to see that people with a knowledge of, shading and color palettes and brush techniques and different stylings and all of these things, when they interact with Midjourney or Stable Diffusion to generate a prompt, and then when they take that prompt and then modify it themselves and then return it to the AI for improvement or modification, you're going to find that these individuals are able to generate images and eventually animations and stuff that are just heads and shoulders above what an average person like, say, myself would be able to do. I'm not an artist. I can barely draw a stick figure with some squiggly lines. So if I interact with the Stable Diffusion model, then I get a quality equivalent to my own skill level. And it's not great. And it takes a lot of extra time. I imagine if I was better at art, it would take significantly less time, because then there would be a lot of stuff that I could take over from the machine. It would lay down my foundation, and then I could generate something better by using it, or by doing my own work on top of it. And I'm just not capable of that. Like I said, I'm not an artist. So I get sort of the lowest possible potential from the machine, because I can't interact with it in a way that an artist who already has trained those skills would be able to do. So I'm really hopeful that we start seeing some folks with some real talent get involved and start using the systems, so that we can really see what the peak potential of those systems are. Because right now, we're just getting piles of average. And I really want to see some exceptional. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So I'm going to stop pontificating here. And we're going to talk a little bit about skills that we can use with the system and sort of how it works. So ChatGPT is an LLM. It's a large language model. What that means is it was trained on a whole lot of text data. And its goal in training on that text data was to learn about how humans speak. And its only goal, it doesn't do math, it doesn't know anything about math, it doesn't have any understanding of accuracy, so it doesn't care if it's correct or not. Its only goal when it gives you a response to what you've said is to sound as much like a human as possible. And now sometimes you accidentally get factual information. If every instance of a certain conversation inside the data set had the exact same factual information in it, like I don't know, like 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? Every time you see 2 plus 2, you're always going to see 4. It's common knowledge information. And this is just an example. I don't actually know the if the model knows what 2 plus 2 is. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Hey, look at that. But anyway, if it sees that same set of information in every bit of data that it consumed in order to learn how to talk like a human, then it's going to respond with that factual information. But it is an accident, because all it is doing is emulating all of the humans that it learned from. So this is not a fact-checking tool. It is not an information gathering tool. It is a human response generator, and that is it. Now, because of that, and because of the massive amount of text it was trained on, you can use it as a wonderful way to help you learn about things. But not by asking it questions and then it giving you answers, by asking it information that you might go to seek. For example, if I wanted to learn calculus, what are some prerequisite mathematical concepts I should learn? Before learning calculus, it is beneficial to have a solid understanding of the following mathematical concepts. Algebra. You should be comfortable manipulating equations and solving for variables. Trigonometry. Familiarity with the concepts of sines, cosines, and tangents will be helpful in calculus. Geometry. Understanding geometric concepts such as points, lines, and basic shapes will be useful in calculus. And precalculus. This branch of mathematics includes concepts such as functions, limits, and graphing, all of which are essential for understanding calculus. Additionally, to be successful in calculus, you should have strong problem-solving and critical thinking skills and a good foundation in mathematical notation and reasoning. This actually last little bit is very interesting to me because it's not even confining itself just to the question I asked it. It's understanding, well, not understanding, but we'll say understanding, and we're going to use some more human-like terms when we describe ChatGPT because it just makes it easier to talk about what it's doing, right? You don't have to obfuscate what you're trying to say with a bunch of technical jargon. We know that it doesn't actually understand anything, so when I say it's understanding something, I just mean it's able to appear as if it's understanding something, I guess. But anyway, so it's going to go beyond even answering my question about just the mathematical concepts and give me some additional general skills that I might need in order to be good at calculus. And you can break these down. Tell me more about algebra. Right, it's sort of giving you a step-by-step here. And of course, we all took geometry before trigonometry in class, but it's giving you a step-by-step here about what things you're going to need to learn, and even sort of in what order you're going to learn them in. So now we ask it to expand on algebra, and it says algebra is a branch of mathematics that deals with mathematical symbols and the rules for manipulating these symbols. It is a unifying thread of almost all of mathematics and includes everything from solving elementary equations to studying abstractions such as groups, rings, and fields. The basic concepts of algebra include variables. These are usually represented by letters such as x, y, or z, and are used to represent unknown values or quantities. Operators. These include arithmetic operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, as well as others like powers, and roots. Equations. These are statements that show that two expressions are equal in value. For example, 2x plus 3 equals 7 is an equation. So 2x plus 3 would mean x equals 2? Yeah, it does. I wonder if it actually knows. Let's ask it. 2x, what is if 2x plus 3 equals 7? What is x? This is another thing, is I really love how deeply it goes into things. So 2x plus 3 equals... So it does know the answer to this. And this is why people are getting tripped up so hard. This is a fairly common expression. I'm sure it chose 2x plus 3 equals 7 because it was something that came up a lot in its training data, right? It didn't just pull a bunch of numbers out of the air and give it to you. So because it was so common in its training data, likely most of this explanation was there as well. And so you're getting this really great, knowledgeable text, but it's an accident. It just wants to sound human. If it didn't know the answer to this, it would just lie to you about what these numbers were supposed to be, and then maybe even lie to you about the steps that you were taking, and then tell you that it was 100% positive that it was correct. And that's a huge pitfall of this model. They just put out a patch, and they said it's going to have better factuality, I think is the words that they used when they put out the patch. And that's great. And I hope that one day it's extremely factual and that it has access to research materials on the fly. I think that'll be wonderful. But for now, you have to be able to fact check it yourself. So I know that the answer is 2 because this is a relatively simple problem and I took algebra in high school. So I know that it's given me correct information, right? And this whole process is wonderful. This is a great explanation of exactly how you got there. I love it. But if I didn't know, like for example, I was trying to learn calculus because I don't know calculus, then all of these steps that it's giving me, even though they look really accurate, the important thing is that you then go start to fact check them, right? When it starts telling you about these algebraic um, concepts, then go ahead, use this as a jumping off point. Open up your Google, open up your textbook, open up whatever it is that you've got as a research tool, and then start looking for these concepts specifically to make sure that the information you're getting here is factual because it's presented in an extremely easy to digest way. Right? I love the bullets. I love how concise the model is. The language it uses is pleasant to read. Right? It makes me want to keep learning because I'm not parsing difficult language or trying to understand the idiosyncrasies of somebody's technically incorrect way of speaking. Right? It's very good at writing very readable sentences. And so I really love that about the model, and I think it's a great tool. If you're trying to learn something, ask it what you should learn, not necessarily for the information or to teach you, and then go seek out that information. It's going to speed up your learning huge amounts. So we're going to close this out. That's just really one of the first skills that you need to learn, is that the model is going to lie to you. It's not necessarily factually correct. It is not a source of information. It is a source of ideas and a source of creativity and a source of human-like speech. And that's it. Don't get it confused with some all-knowing genius machine. It's not. It doesn't actually know anything except how to talk like a human. So next we're going to get a little deeper into some stuff. Um, we're going to do that by generating our fantasy world together. And I always like to start my chats off when I'm going to be having a longer chat. And I think it's important to have a longer chat with the model because you start adding parameters to what it's trying to inform you of, and those parameter additions narrow down the data set that it can draw from, which gives it more precise information, and I think ultimately cleans up a lot of what it says. So definitely longer conversations, and if you're trying to get information out of it, or trying to talk about something technical, using the vocabulary of the industry that you're trying to get information or writing about, I think is going to give you better quality output as well. Because again, technical vocabulary is used in technical journals. It's used in industry memos. It's used in conversation between two individuals who work in an industry, are experts in a field. And so the data that it pulls from, when you start using more technical language, is going to be a more technical data set, which will ultimately give you superior outputs. It is, I think, marginally superior, but every little thing that you can do to help the model is going to improve the quality of your outputs, and those incremental increases in quality are going to be what separates your outputs from the obvious average output of somebody just coming in and saying, write me a paper about X. That output is easy to spot, but write me a paper about X after you've had a conversation with it about the topic you're interested in is going to be a much, much better paper. So let's start having a conversation. Hello, today I would like to build a fantasy world with you. I'd be happy to help you build a fantasy world. What kind of world are you imagining? Are there certain races, cultures, or magic systems? Are your systems you're interested in including? Feel free to give me as much or as little detail as you'd like. I'll do my best to help bring your vision to life. Great. What a wonderful little chatbot. So, one of the important things here, ChatGPT remembers what you talk about to a point. Eventually, it'll start forgetting. So, on a project that is as big as creating a world, it is important that we break it into chunks and that we condense and save pertinent information. So, part of that is going to be getting multiple chats involved, right? And using these different chats as sort of an outline, and a file system or a folder system to break chunks of your world up. And then part of that is going to be using outside resources, right? It can't remember everything that you're telling it, and as you go deeper and deeper into the chat, it forgets. So if you get it to condense and list important attributes, characteristics, world events, things like that, then even if you don't get the exact same response from the details, you can at least keep things going in the same thread so your world doesn't just become a plot hole riddled garbage heap. So the first thing we're going to do is let's talk about our magic system. Let's get started by talking about the magic system. Sure, the magic system is a key aspect of any fantasy world, as it sets the rules for how magic works and shapes the way the characters interact with the world. Here are a few examples of different magic systems that you might consider for your fantasy world. Elemental magic. In this system, magic users can control the elements fire, water, earth, air to cast spells and perform feats. Divine magic. This system involves magic users receiving their powers from gods or other higher powers. They may be able to call upon divine beings to aid them in battle or other endeavors. Blood magic. This type of magic is fueled by the life force of the user or others. It is often seen as dangerous and taboo. Runic magic. This system involves magic users inscribing runes or other symbols to cast spells. These symbols can be inscribed on surfaces, using it as talismans, or even in the user body. Ooh. And psionic magic. This system involves the manipulation of the mind and the manipulation of reality through willpower or psychic abilities. These are just a few examples, and there are many other possibilities when it comes to the magic system in your fantasy world. Let me know if you have any further questions or if you have any other ideas you want to explore. personally, I like the idea of runic magic because I like the when I went to school, I was a computer science major, and I just like the idea of using language to generate effect, especially because to me, computer programming is just so sort of magical. I mean, being able to create just an almost infinite amount of potential stuff on a computer in in an outside world that seems so finite, it's just always had this really sort of magical draw to me. And so I think we're going to use runic magic, and maybe we will flavor that later into some sort of runic slash spoken. So that there is still this sort of castable on the fly magic, but also this system of preparation and creating magic artifacts and stuff like that. I think runic magic really lends itself to that. So we are going to use a system of runic magic that incorporates spoken language for active casting. Don't even have to know how to spell, which is wonderful because I'm terrible at spelling. A runic magic system that incorporates spoken language for active casting sounds interesting. Here's how you could develop this system further. And this is just a huge, huge power of ChatGPT, is that it's going to help you. It's going to recommend things. You almost never tell it something without it parroting that thing back to you and then helping you fix it. It's a very yes and. I don't know if any of you have ever done any theater or improv, but yes and is a very important part of that, where you you always say yes to whatever the other person says and then try and add to it. And this chat model is very good at that. It it always encourages what you said and then tries to give you some more. So the runes. The runes are the foundation of the magic system. They are symbols that represent different concepts, elements, and powers. These runes can be inscribed on surfaces, used as talismans, or even inked into the skin of the user. Learning the runes, magic users called rune masters learn the runes through study, practice, and apprenticeship. Each rune master may have their own unique set of runes that they've learned and specialized in using. Ooh. Activating the runes. To cast a spell, a rune master speaks a specific phrase or incantation that corresponds to the runes they wish to activate. The spoken words serve as an activation key for the runes and helps the rune master to focus their will and intent. Ooh, that's interesting. Combining runes. By combining multiple runes, rune masters can create more powerful and complex spells. Each combination of runes will have a unique incantation. Limitations. As in most magic systems, this one could have limitations like only a certain number of runes can be activated at a time, or the spell could have a strong backlash if the incantation is not said correctly. So I like all of these except for number 5. I don't necessarily want to put a limit on the number of runes, but perhaps a system of mana, and I wouldn't even want to call it mana, but a system of power that is required to go into these runes. And so if you don't have the requisite power, it could even be a draw on your physical power. And this is something that happens a lot in fantasy worlds where magic starts to draw on your physical strength. But if you just don't have the physical strength to to utilize X number of runes, then your spell just wouldn't be able to complete. I don't know if I want to go as far as to say if you exceed your physical strength limitations, it kills you. I know that's also a common trope, but I want to explore the upper reaches of the potential of the magic system, and I want my characters to explore the upper reaches of the magical system. And so I don't want them hamstrung by this idea that they could die, right? Because then, especially if you're just practicing, then it's completely foolhardy and not something that most people would do to attempt something so extreme that it could just straight up kill them, right? That's sort of out of the realm of reason. So let's say keep all these rules, but alter rule 5 so that physical strength is so that an increasing amount of physical strength is required to activate. We want to say activate, right? Because you can always place the runes down, but you can't activate the runes. To activate spells, to activate longer and more complex spells. Not having enough strength will cause the spell to fail and we'll say exhaust the caster. Altering the magic system so that an increasing amount of physical strength is required to activate longer or more complex spells is an interesting idea. Here's how this rule would play out. Each rune activated in a spell has a strength cost associated with it. This cost reflects the amount of physical effort required to activate the rune and maintain the spell. When a rune master activates multiple runes at once, the strength cost of the spell is the sum of the strength costs of all the runes. A rune master can use their own physical strength to activate the runes and maintain the spell, but they can also use other sources of strength such as a magical staff, enchanted object, or external being. Ooh, nice. That's a great little addition. If the Rune Master doesn't have enough strength to activate all of the runes in a spell, or if the Rune Master runs out of strength during the casting, the spell will fail and the Rune Master will be exhausted. Rune Masters can train and increase their physical strength to be able to cast more complex spell. It's having some trouble with tenses right now. That's a couple of times it's to be able to cast more complex spells, but also can use other sources of strength as mentioned before. It could also be added that some specific spell could have a high physical toll on the caster and exhaust them for a long period of time, or even cause injury. I really like this last one. There could be, maybe some forbidden runes or some unique runes that have been lost in history that were exceptionally difficult to use because of the extreme strength requirements in order to cast them. This new rule adds a layer of realism and strategy to the magic system, as rune masters will have to balance the power of the spell they want to cast with the physical effort required to cast it, and also how to get the strength required to cast the spell. It also creates a need for rune masters to focus on their physical fitness as well as their mastery of the runes. Keep me updated on other ideas and how you want to expand the magic system, and if you need any other assistance. This is all great. Please write me a list of all the sorry. This is great. Keep this, or I'm just gonna say make this canon. Okay, mostly I'm going to ignore what it's going to say right here. I might come back to it. But this is, I wanted to make it canon, and then I want to have it. Ooh, having some issues. Something that happens. You know, they said they added a button. Okay. Let's save and submit. Hey, there we go. See if it gets through the whole thing this time. They said they had a button or something that you could press now to get it to stop giving a response, or maybe. No. Hmm. I don't know. But you can see just as you talk to it, it's coming up with so many good ideas. And I've taken the super lazy way out, and I've just sort of accepted all of its ideas, and I haven't told it to refine very many of them. Actually, I should have told it to refine number 6 here. But just for the sake of showing you what I'm about to show you, I wanted to move on. But now that we've got all this canon information, at any point you can just say, please write me a list of rules that we agreed upon for our magic system. And then bammo, sure, here is a list of rules for the runic magic system we've discussed. The runes are symbols that represent different concepts, elements, and powers. These runes can be inscribed on surfaces, used as talismans, or even inked into the skin of the user. Magic users, called rune masters, learn the runes through study, practice, and apprenticeship. Each rune master may have their own unique set of runes that they've learned and specialize in using. To cast a spell, a rune master speaks a specific phrase or incantation that corresponds to the runes they wish to activate. The spoken words serve as an activation key for the runes, and helps the rune master to focus their will and intent. By combining multiple runes, rune masters can create more powerful and complex spells. Each combination of runes will have a unique incantation. Activating runes has a strength cost associated with it, which reflects the amount of physical effort required to activate the rune and maintain the spell. The strength cost of a spell is the sum of the strength costs of all the runes activated. The rune master can use their own physical strength to activate the runes and maintain the spell, but they can also use other sources of strength such as a magical staff, enchanted object, or an external being. If the rune master doesn't have enough strength to activate all of the runes in a spell, or if the rune master runs out of strength during the casting, the spell will fail and the rune master will be exhausted. Rune masters can train and increase their physical strength to be able to cast more complex spells, but also can use other sources of strength as mentioned before. Some specific spells could have a high physical toll on the caster and exhaust them for a long period of time or even cause injury. So this is I like the maybe cause injury part, but only a little bit. So this is what I was talking about before. We've got oh, it doesn't let me copy the one. That makes me really sad. Well, I imagine that copy pasting it even without the actual bullets will probably be okay. But I'm just going to save that. And I have an empty notes page. I'm actually just found this program called Notion. Oh, wow. Wow. So I just found this program called Notion. Um, and so I'm going to use that to keep all of this information. And, oh, that's interesting. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to keep all of this information in a Notion file. It's extremely powerful, really good nesting, really good page linking, really good stuff like that. I just found it yesterday. And so I'm going to be copy and pasting pertinent information into that, and then going back later and organizing it into a sort of file folder system so that I can access it easier, because it's not going to be very much longer before we start getting to a point where it starts forgetting stuff, and then I'm going to create a new chat, and that new chat will just be about the magic system. And then I'll just condense like we did here, right? It just gave me a list, and this is all the rules we've discussed over this whole long chat. So now instead of having to memorize all of this, it just has to memorize this condensed information. You can put this at the top of a magic page, and then anytime you wanted to create a new spell or a new combination of runes, or anything like that that was important to a certain character that you wanted to associate that spell with or something, then you could just go to that magic page, have it generate that based on the rules you've already given, and then you can copy paste that over to the character that you wanted, and then when you were going to use that character in a part of the story, you just copy paste that character in and say, okay, now write me the story about this moment in this character's life, and it has all of the pertinent information, and maybe it's not remembering all of that pertinent information all at the same time all of the time, but because you've saved and manipulated that information into a readable format for the system, you can get a lot more power out of it. And if you're going to do a larger project like this, you're going to have to find ways around its limitations, because it does have them. It can't save everything, it can't know everything, it can't remember everything, it can't reread your entire chat every time, because honestly, I've had chats with this thing. With the new update, actually all of my chats disappeared. That's another good reason to save stuff. Um, but it's just not feasible to expect it to reread everything or keep everything straight all of the time. So you have to do that for it. There's skill and effort and work involved in creating, even when you're using a system that is as powerful as this, that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and just causing you to have to refine that work. So, and this is, I think, probably the most important thing to recognize, and to have a conversation about with AI assistants like this, is that yes, it's faster. Absolutely, 100%. Yes, it raises the minimum, because I can just go over here, start a new chat, and tell me a fantasy story. Right? That's totally a thing that can happen. And it's going to spit out a story that would have taken me hours to write, because I'm not a terribly good writer. And it honestly probably sounds better than what I would have written, because again, I'm not a terribly good writer. But this is the baseline, right? This is as bad as it gets. And it's recognizable as written by the AI. It's recognizable as the baseline. And so as people become more familiar with the content that gets produced by these AI assistants, this is going to start being unacceptable. Just like there's tons of content that gets created now that is 100% human made that doesn't meet the minimum requirement for engagement. Right? There's a finite amount of time that every person has to consume creative content. And if your content exists at the baseline of human capability, then you don't get engagement. And the same is going to be true of these AI assistants. If you put in the minimum effort and you just tell it to tell you a fantasy story, and you don't help it build a world, and you don't manage the rules of your system so that you can keep the story coherent, and you don't read and edit and re-prompt to get a more specific response and do all of those things, then you're not going to get a quality story. and it's going to take time and it's going to take energy. And ultimately, I mean, if, for example, George R.R. Martin or Stephen King or one of the quote unquote great authors of our time jumped on here and started building a world with this machine and helped it write a story, it would be vastly superior to anything that I can get this program to create, because I'm not nearly as familiar with writing conventions and story, um, like the makeup of a story, the pacing, the tone, what's going to draw a person in at a certain time, when you need to drop certain twists on your characters or on your readers as they go through a story. Um, all of that stuff is learned. It's a skill. And while some of that exists in the program, it does not it does not meet the quality of a professional writer, and I doubt that it ever really will. So it's important to remember that what you put into it is what you get out of it. If you just tell it to tell you a fantasy story, you'll get a fun little fantasy story, right? This could be fun. You could come in here and tell it. You could tell it to do it again, right? And it's going to give you a different fantasy story. Weird that it said a land far, far away once upon a time. I mean, I guess it's probably going to start them all like that. And that's probably specifically keyed about the fantasy of the fantasy story. But again, that's something you can recognize, and that's something you can change in a prompt. Just a minor little thing without starting with once upon a time, right? Boom. Deep within the enchanted forest. Bam. No more land far, far away. No more once upon a time. No more of that garbage. And that's just altering the prompt that you already put in. Right? There's one little step that I think improves the whole thing. The other thing is sometimes it uses characters that exist in literature. And you can tell it. Use character names that are not currently seen in popular literature. And get it to make up its own names. Wow, this one's much, much longer than the last ones. That's interesting. I wonder if that has something to do with me telling it not to start with Once Upon a Time. And why that would happen. It's quirky. It's really quirky. But anyway, this is how you get garbage, right? This is garbage. This is the baseline. Anybody can do this because literally all it takes is one prompt. This is now as bad as a story gets. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with this being the worst story available. I don't want to read the story. I haven't read any of these stories, right? Because I know that they're just going to be formulaic. They're going to be lacking in interaction. You can see the characters aren't talking to each other or anything like that because there's no personality to any of the characters. There's no interest or intrigue in here. Nobody wants to read this. This is garbage. So we're just going to throw it in the garbage. But we have our magic system. And we have some rules for our magic system. So let's create a new chat. And this new chat is going to be about our magic system. So we're going to post in our information here. We're going to say these are the rules to a magic system we are creating together. This is an interesting magic system that you have described. With the use of runes as a central element, the idea of using incantations as activation keys for the runes is a unique aspect of the system, as is the concept of strength cost for spells. The idea of using other sources of strength, such as a magical staff or an enchanted object, is also an interesting one, and allows for the possibility of characters who specialize in different types of magic. The idea that specific spells could have a high physical toll on the caster is also a compelling one. as it adds an element of risk and consequence to spellcasting. This can also be used to create interesting plot lines and make the characters have to make difficult decisions when faced with powerful spells that could have dangerous consequences. It's important to note that while the idea is very well fleshed out and intriguing, it's not based on any historical or cultural tradition. It's a fictional concept that you've come up with. Okay, sweet. Um, so this is something that it does, and I imagine you could probably get it to stop doing this, but it always checks its knowledge with you, right? It wants to tell you about what it's read, and it summarizes to let you know this is what I understand about what you've just said. Um, and in education, that's something that's done all the time, right? You want to knowledge check students. You want to constantly reinforce to them what they're learning by having them parrot it back to you. So this is an extremely common thing to have humans say, but also, even though we want humans to do it, and sometimes they do, sort of a hallmark of human interaction and language is that we don't always follow the rules. This always follows the rules, and I think that's one of its identifying hallmarks, and one of the things that makes it so obvious that it's a bot is that it always does this. But I might do some tests with it later and see if it will stop doing the knowledge check summaries. That would be an interesting thought. But now we've created this whole new chat, and we've given it all the rules. Right, everything we've done in this chat now exists in this chat, and we could totally delete this chat now if we wanted, and start world building anew. But what we'll actually probably do is we'll probably go back to this prompt right here where we said let's start by talking about the magic system, and we'll probably instead start by talking about something else right at this point in this chat. So we're creating this fictional magic. So now what I want to do with this is I want to use this as an engine, right? We've got this information, we've got the bot, it knows what it's talking about. So now we can just start generating stuff. So generate a spell effect with the following format. Spell name. Spell effect. Rune names. Number of runes. Strength required. Let's do relative strength required, because we don't want to create an exact amount. And actually, I think I want spell effect to be at the bottom because I want it to be the richest description. So spell effect and actually let's do spell effect, and then let's get some flavor text. Love me some flavor text. I'm a big Magic the Gathering nerd. One of the favorite things about Magic the Gathering cards is the little tidbits of flavor information at the bottom. So let's do that. So generate a spell effect with the following format. Now once we do this, it's always going to follow the format when we tell it to generate spells, which is, again, a wonderful... The way you can create creation engines with ChatGPT is just phenomenal, and I love every minute of it. So generate a spell effect with the following format. And let's just see what it gives us. Spell name, Ignis Umbra, Fire Shadow. Rune names, Fehu, Uruz, and Unsus. Number of runes, 3. Relative strength required, high. See, this is exactly what I was looking for. Wonderful. Spell effect, creates a shadowy figure made of fire that will obey the commands of the caster and fight for them. The figure lasts for a duration of 1 minute per level of the caster. Flavor text, from darkness fire arises with the power of I call forth the Ignis Umbra to do my bidding. Note, this spell is just a fiction, not a spell. This name, magical traditional orders, cultural system, blah 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 blah. I need to get it to stop saying this. Magic system. I think I need to edit this. Okay, so I want to keep this prompt for a magic system. We're going to edit this to say for a fantasy world we are creating together, right? Because it keeps reminding me that it's a fantasy world. So if I explicitly state that we're creating this fantasy world together, why you hate me? Fantasy world we are creating together. I wonder for the fantasy spell frostbite. It's interesting that this time it didn't give it like a Latin name. It just called it frostbite. That's interesting. Spell effect creates a burst of sub-zero temperatures, freezing, and causing damage to anything within a certain area. Flavor text with a powerful incantation and the precise arrangement of the runes. Fehu Uruz Algiz. The mage channels the bitter cold of the far north and unleashes it upon their enemies. Those caught in the blast are frozen solid, their flesh crackling with ice as the spell's power takes hold. Beware the wrath of the frostbite spell, for it can turn flesh to ice and steel to brittle in an instant. Interesting. So now we can keep this, right? We can make this canon. We could copy and paste it into our notebook. We can do whatever we want with it. But now that we have this engine generated, every time we go back and edit, you saw it deleted the old spell and just made a new one. So we've now set up this chat to be an engine for us that we never have to remind of anything. And normally we would be able to go back and even change the information here. Obviously, this is very incomplete, and we would like to have even more detailed information about the spell system. But this is a good baseline, and this is a good way of being able to just get this information out there. So now we can always just go back, do whatever we want. I wonder if we give it a spell name, right? If I tell it the spell is going to be called Firewall, what would it do? firewall spell creates a barrier of intense flames that can be used to block or damage enemies. The barrier is composed of 3 interconnected runes, Awaz, Kinaz, and Fehu, representing the concepts of defense, strength, and wealth, respectively. Ooh, this is interesting. I can't believe that it actually gave me the concepts that the runes represent. That is really, really interesting. We could have it write an entire runic language. And honestly, we probably need to because we want it to continue. It's not terribly important that it just constantly uses the same runes for the same concepts every single time, but would be interesting if it did. And I actually am going to... Oh wow, this is a rune that actually exists. Awaz is the reconstructed Proto-Germanic name of the rune. Looks like a backwards Z, coming from the word U. 2 variants of the word are reconstructed for Proto-Germanic Ihaz, continued in Old English as Ao and Iwaz. I'm likely mispronouncing it now that I know it's an actual word that describes a specific rune. There is certainly interesting. There's certainly an expected pronunciation, so I'm sorry if anybody actually knows how to pronounce that and I didn't do it right. Let's see what it's... Hey, look at that. So this says that Iwaz is sometimes likened to the death card in tarot. It is a rune of transformation and testing, stripping away that which is worn out, diseased, or weak, so that strong new growth may occur. It is the rune of the yew tree, a symbol of age, endurance, death, and eternal life. So this was saying that it represents defense. I could see how, it talks about endurance, eternal life, age, the yew tree. That is extremely, extremely interesting. Wow. I I have to check now if the rest of these are real runic symbols, and it looks like they are. It looks like it's taking... It says Proto-Germanic. I imagine they're all from the same. That's... Oh my god. So cool. Let's look at the meaning of this one. It says the Fehu means mobile wealth. Yeah, absolutely. Defense, strength, and wealth. I don't know why the wealth rune seems to be so popular. Maybe it's using it as uh, like a rune for magnitude. So something to increase the size of, wealth doesn't necessarily have to respectful or to be representative of money. It could be, the wealth of flame. So the magnitude of the flame that was being conjured. That kind of makes sense to me. I might just be talking out of my butt though. That is incredibly interesting. So it's not even creating this out of its own mind. It's using an existing runic language, and I think doing a fairly decent job of it. But it is constantly giving 3 runes, and that upsets me. So when we go back in here, I don't want it to be firewall anymore. Number of runes, let's do 1 to 5. This should also change the way it calculates relative strength, right? Because it knows that strength is based on the number of runes, and it knows now that we're going to be using runes 1 through 5. So let's see. Oh, it's going to create frostbite again. Rune names: ice, cold, winter, numbing, freezing. Number of runes 5. Relative strength required high. Spell effect: this spell sends a blast of freezing air towards the target, encasing them in a block of ice, causing them to take cold damage over time. The spell also slows the target's movements, making them more vulnerable to attacks. Flavor text. With a chill running down your spine, you activate the runes of ice, cold, winter, numbing, and freezing. Oh, you activate the runes of ice, cold, winter, numbing, and freezing. As you speak the incantation, a gust of freezing wind erupts from your hands, engulfing your enemy in a barrage of ice and snow. Their screams are muffled as they are encased in the icy prison, and the cold begins to seep into their bones. This is great. I love the flavor text. It's coming up with some great flavor texts. Now I want to add some different things. I want to put rune names in here. I like that it was using an existing runic language, but I don't want to take the time to research the runic language. So I'm just going to tell it to use English rune names. Right, so it's going to say things like ice, cold, winter, numbing, freezing, stuff like that. I want it to keep doing that. Because that'll just be easier to deal with. Number of runes, spell effect, relative strength. I also want it to incantation for activation. I want it to write an incantation for me. Now let's save and submit and see what happens. Fireball. Fire, air. Hey, finally, it gave me a different number of runes than the max. Relative strength required is always high. Incantation for activation. Fear R, ignite and burn. Creates a ball of fire that explodes on impact, dealing heavy fire damage to a target area. Flavor text. This spell is favored by Pyromancer rune masters. It summons a fireball, a ball of scorching flames, which explode on impact, leaving nothing but ash and destruction in its wake. What would be... let's change this again, because I wanted to call it like ignite and fire, not fear and air. So let's change this again and put American English rune names. Relative strength required, low to high. So let's just get rid of those backspaces, those are unnecessary. And now let's see, spell name, Flame Strike. American English rune names, Ignis, Fire, Vindicta, Vengeance. Incantation for activation. By the power of Ignis and Vindicta, I call upon the flames of vengeance. Let it strike down my foes. God, that's so good. Spell effect. This spell summons a powerful burst of flames that strike at a single target, dealing significant damage and potentially setting them on fire. Flavor text. The rune master speaks the incantation, tracing the Ignis and Vindicta runes in the air. The runes glow with a fierce heat, and a pillar of flame descends upon the target, consuming them in an inferno of wrath. I really like this. Now we've been world building for a really long time, so I want to talk about the power of generating stories after you've started doing some of this. We talked about sort of the baseline and how garbage in creates garbage out, but we've put some effort in now. So let's get a little story. Um, Tell me the story of the rune master who first created the flame strike spell. Give him a name and give him a name. Yeah, we'll just do that. So now it's going to tell me a story. The story of the rune master who first created the flame strike spell is one of loss, determination, and power. His name was Kale Stormbringer, an experienced and powerful rune master who lived in a world torn apart by war and strife. Kale had always been fascinated by the power of fire and had spent many years studying the Ignis rune and learning to harness its power, but it wasn't until a tragic event in his life that he became truly determined to master the full potential of this rune. He lost his wife and children in an attack on his village by a rival warlord, and swore to himself that he would one day avenge their deaths. He spent the next several years researching and experimenting with different combinations of runes, searching for a spell that would give him the power to strike down his enemies with fire. Eventually he discovered the Vindicta rune, which represented vengeance. He realized that when used in conjunction with the Ignis rune, it would give him the power to summon a powerful burst of flames that would strike down his enemies. Kale spent months perfecting the incantation and the precise movements required to activate the spell. He also had to physically train himself to increase his strength, as the spell required a lot of energy to sustain. Finally, he was ready to put his new spell to the test. He journeyed to the warlord's stronghold alone and armed only with his knowledge of the flame strike spell. He arrived at the stronghold and without hesitation began to cast the spell. The runes glowed with fierce heat, and a pillar of flame descended upon the warlord and his guards, consuming them in an inferno of wrath. Kale emerged from the stronghold victorious, but also forever changed by the power he had wielded. He had succeeded in avenging the deaths of his loved ones, but at a great cost to himself. From then on, he became a solitary figure, traveling the land using his knowledge of the flame strike spell to aid those in need, but always keeping his distance, haunted by the memories of the past. He was known as the Flame Bringer, or the Vengeful One, among the people. He never forgot the love and compassion he had for his wife and children, and the tragic event that had led him to create the spell, but he also knew that the power of the Flame Strike spell was a double-edged sword and should be used wisely. And so this is sort of what I've been talking about before. You can really flesh out your world by having it create these little stories like this for you. Right, I'm going to save this, and I'm actually going to save this spell as well, because this is an incredible story, right? It incorporated the fact that it used one of the spells was vengeance. It gave an extremely good reason as to why the vengeance rune specifically would have been used in the creation of that spell by the rune master who was, the one who invented it. Um, which makes me really love the fact that the strength requirement is high even though the number of runes is low. And it adds a lot to the flavor text as well. I mean, this whole story is just incredible to read. There are obviously some problems technically with the way it's written. Um, the the bot goes out of its way to utilize all of the rules, right? Like it talks about the strength requirement, the fact that he had to get stronger to use it. Um, it talks about sort of each rule that we've created for our magic system individually and explains them. And if it does that every single time, then that repetition could get boring. So something you could do is, because all spells follow the same rules and we know that those spells follow the same rules, when we start talking about what's going on and we start writing our story in earnest, um, telling it to ignore things that we've designated as common knowledge and not explain common knowledge concepts in our world will be a way to get it to stop talking about those things so repetitively. And that's really easy. We can just go in here and tag information, right, as common knowledge, and then tell it, please don't explain any concepts tagged common knowledge in your story. And it will absolutely do that. Maybe not every time, maybe not 100%. It might throw an explanation in there here or there, but that's honestly a fairly human thing to do, and so I don't think would take away from our story at all. So I'm going to save these together because this is awesome, and I want this to be canon. Honestly, I'm going to, when I start making the engine that's going to create our characters, I'm going to create Gale Stormbringer, and maybe he's a historical figure, maybe he'll be dead or something like that, but I oh, this is so wonderful. I'm really enjoying this Notion program that I'm using. It's really, really good. It is creating some lists out of things that I don't necessarily want lists for, but it should be relatively easy to go back and sort of organize that information better. It's really, really strong. But now I don't have to keep any of this, so I can go back and try again. Something that is bothering me is that it keeps using a high relative strength. I don't like that. And I don't like that it keeps... I mean, it is using the same Proto-Germanic rune set the entire time, right? Let me make sure Ignis is also part of that same... Ignis rune meaning. Hmm. Well, let's look at Vindicta. Hmm. No, so these are not from the same runic language. So I would like to get rid of these, and I'm having trouble. Having trouble getting it to do what I want there. But that's the point, is you have to keep... there we go. Fire, strike, number of runes 2, medium. So we've already created that spell. I don't want to have that. It finally gave me a medium. See, and now it's giving me weird stuff again. It's created Fireball again. Fireblade. Ignis. With the power of Ignis, I call upon the flames to ignite my blade. The blade of the Runemaster's weapon becomes engulfed in flames, increasing the weapon's damage output. Fireblade spell is a favorite among warriors, as it imbues their weapons with the power of fire, making it a formidable tool in battle. Excellent. I like some of how the engine is working right now. There are some things that I don't like about it. I don't like that it keeps morphing around with names. So I think we're going to have to create the runes and save them like we did the list of rules and put them at the top of the engine so that it uses the same runes every time and for the same uses, right? So we'll have the rune, well, and if we just use American English names, right, like fire, vengeance, just using those because they've already been brought up, but if we just use those same names, as you saw, it's very good at using the context of what the word means to inform what the spell it's going to be used for means. And I'm actually really, really happy about that. It's just this intuitive thing that it did. I didn't really even expect it. I just kind of expected it to throw out some gobbledygook. And instead, it gave me this really, really comprehensive, interconnected, beautiful thing. So we're going to have to consider creating a rune set, saving that, and adding that at the top. And I think that will make our engine much, much better. Also, if we create the runes, we can provide a strength metric to the runes that will help inform this relative strength requirement, which will also give a lot more consistency to our tool. And I think because if we have a rune set already created, it will also give us more variability, right? We're seeing a lot of duplicates already. And that's because it feels like it has a solution, and so it's trying to stick to that solution. And because we haven't given it a broader list of terms to use, it's kind of stuck in this loop. We want to break it out of that. So the best way to do that is going to be to give it lots of different stuff to pull from. So we're going to go back. Did I save our generator? No, I did not, but that's fine. I like this for the way our spells are generated. There might be some other stuff that we can add to it later, but let's talk about, let's make a list of let's create, let's say 26 runes using American English incorporating a variety of elements and attributes to use in our magic system. Sure, I can help you create 26 runes using American English, incorporating various elements and attributes. Keep in mind that the names, meanings, and associations of the runes you create will depend on the fantasy world and culture you're building and might not have any relation to real-world historical runes. Here's a list of 26 runes that you can use. Air represents the element of air, earth, fire, water, aether, ice, thunder, light, dark, life, death. love, fear. And I love, so when you look at all of these different things, right, it's telling you a lot about the different associations it's going to make when it uses these runes, right? Air represents the element of air, wind, and movement associated with communication and intellect. Represents the element of earth, stability, and grounding associated with strength and fertility. So even though we're only creating 26 runes, summoning, illusion, serenity, anger, hope, fear, love, death, healing, protection, knowledge, time, space, abundance, binding, and nature. So these are an incredible set of 26 runes. I'm very happy with that. But it's really gone the extra mile here, and that's because we're calling it a runic language, right? And in real human history, runic languages have been very representative. And so instead of the word air just meaning the word air or the rune for air has always had a much more contextual meaning. And so when you put it together with other things, the meaning of it starts to change. And so that's an important part of runic languages, and just inherently the AI knows that. And so when it creates this wonderful little set of associations with each one of these. Now I just want, because I already know that the bot knows what these representations are, and because I assume that that's a solution in its mind and that it's not going to drastically change those associations if I don't include these associations. And again, I want to minimize, well, maybe I will just keep all the associations because then I can read it and I won't forget. And that's kind of important. So let's go ahead and copy these. Man, this is so awesome. And we're going to save them in my little notebook. And these are now the 26 runes that are going to be used in our world. Now, I would like to edit this and put this back further up here so that it's easier to use the, the generator. I'm actually going to copy all of this and put it down here and chain and create the engine down here. Awesome. So now we're going to get really outside of the box here. Here's an example of a spell effect. Spell name binding shackles, American English rune names binding, number of runes, relative strength required, medium, incantation for activation. By the power of the binding rune, I bind you to my will. Spell effect. The spell creates physical shackles made of magical energy that immobilize the target, preventing them from moving or using any abilities. Flavor text. The Binding Shackle spell is a popular choice among those who specialize in control and manipulation magic. Its effectiveness as immobilizing opponents makes it a powerful tool in both combat and interrogation scenarios. Note that this spell is designed as a control spell. It may be seen as too powerful and could limit players' choices if overused in game setting. It's always important to balance power and consequence. This is really nice right here. So we're building a world, and ultimately I wanted to use that world to just write stories. But there is no reason that you couldn't be using an engine like this to create something for a video game or something for a tabletop game or any number of different things, right? World building has so much potential and so many areas that it can be used in. that there's no reason that you need to confine yourself to just these. Now, I like this spell. I like the way it's structured. But because we're going to be able to generate things so quickly, I no longer feel a need to just keep everything that it throws at me, right? I can delete this. Who cares? Um, what I'm really going to be looking for as I use this generator, because ultimately I just want to use the the world that we're building to tell stories together with the AI. We're gonna make stories. I'm gonna read them out here as we go through this series. I might publish the stories independently onto the YouTube, just so people can listen to them independently and sort of get a feel for the world, so you don't have to watch the entire world building process, but can just listen to the stories. There's going to be tons of stuff like that going on the channel moving forward. Um, but so I'm going to be looking for specifically like signature spells, things that either everybody is going to use, right? Maybe some really, really basic stuff like a basic flame spell to light candles that just everybody is going to do. And then signature spells that individual rune masters in the world are going to use more often, whether they be combat, whether they be sneaky specialists or stealth specialists who are going to be sneaking around, or different things like that. You're going to be able to identify sort of what individual is being talked about based on that signature spell. So we're just going to let it regenerate a response here. Let's see how different things get now. So far, we've only gotten one rune responses. With the power of ice, I freeze my enemies in their tracks. These incantations are getting a little hokey, but whatever, I like it. The spell creates a blast of freezing air around the target, slowing down their movements and dealing damage over time. That's another thing, though, is you can also set up rules for each one of these, right? We created all of the runes, but you could also create rules for the incantations. You could create rules for the spell effects, right? If you didn't want to talk about the damage it dealt and stuff like that, you wanted to take a more narrative approach to the spell effects, then you could absolutely do that. The flavor text actually is a great way to do it. You could just replace the spell effect with flavor text and just take a narrative approach to the spells if you weren't planning on using them for a game. And that would go a long way towards just improving the creativity of your world. So let's make another one. We're going to generate a whole bunch here because I want to see it do things like this. I want to see it use multiple runes. I want to see it change strength requirements. With the power of darkness, I bind you to my will. It's repeating a lot of incantations already, right? It likes to use this with the power, and I bind you have been really popular so far. It is using the dark and binding, um, but I would prefer that it maybe used an incantation that was like, I bind you to the shadows, or I bind you with shadow, or something like that. Um, because that suits a shadow bind spell better. But again, that's part of your work that you have to be doing with these, right? It generated all of this. I don't have to think about most of it. I'm tweaking. So you're going to recognize repetitive patterns because, you're deleting this stuff for the bot. It doesn't even know that the other spells exist anymore. So you're the one who's recognizing the patterns. You're the one who's fixing that repetitiveness. You're the one who's using your skill and talent as a writer to improve the quality of what's being provided. Garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't put any effort into it, then you're going to get, you saw before we made the runes, everything was fire and ice. All we got was fire and ice spells the entire time. Now we've made 26 runes. We've gotten binding. We've actually gotten multiple binding spells now, which is a little strange. But we're gonna see. We're gonna make a bunch of different stuff, and we're gonna see what happens. Shield of the Ancestors. This one ought to be awesome. Protection, Aether Life, a 3 rune. Medium, with the power of protection, aether, and life, I call upon the strength of my ancestors to shield me from harm. I really like that incantation. Using the rune names in the incantation, I might make that a rule. Spell effect, the spell creates a magical barrier around the rune master that protects them from physical and magical attacks. The Shield of the Ancestors is a powerful spell that harnesses the magic of protection, the power of the ethereal realm, and the vitality of life to create a formidable barrier against harm. Cool. Let's make another one. Binding Chain. We're getting a lot of binding. It's a pretty big fan of binding. Incantation. With the power of binding and aether, I chain and restrict the movement of my target. I don't like of my target. That's very, very metagamey, right? If you were using this in a game or even in a story, that just feels very out of character sort of way to describe the spell, so I'd probably change that to like I chain and restrict the movement of my enemies or something like that. Spell effect, the spell creates ethereal chains that bind the target in place, making them unable to move or attack. The chains can only be broken by significant physical force or by the use of a spell specifically designed to counter the binding effect. That's interesting. It's talking about counters now. Flavor text, the binding chain spell is a favorite among those who specialize in control manipulation magic. It allows them to neutralize any potential threats with ease. Let's make another spell. Shadow Step. Dark and space. 2 runes, low. I really like how creative this system seems to be. It's putting together some very, very interesting combinations to create stuff that we already sort of conceptually know, right? Like Shadow Step isn't some out of this world idea. If you were making a magic system, at some point you would probably create some sort of short distance teleportation magic effect. But now we just have it here. The relative strength required is low, even though it's a 2-runer, which tells me that the bot is understanding here this is likely to be something that's going to be used often, and isn't going to require, right? It's just a movement-based ability, and particularly a short-distance movement-based ability. Incantation. With the power of the dark and space, I weave the shadows and disappear from sight. I would use a much smaller incantation, and that's something actually that this brings forward, is we need to find a way to get the bot to relate the incantation length with the relative strength requirement and number of runes required. So if we've got extremely low strength requirements, we want super small activations. I might even go as low as to say the activation for this particular spell should be just the word step, or flash, or shadow walk, or shadow step, even if you just wanted to use the spell name, or something like that. So we need to consider a way to teach the bot that we want to associate that. We could explicitly say it up here in the rules for magic, and we might do that. I don't really know. But definitely we need, because you can't, every time you're shadow stepping, right, you can't say, with the power of the dark in space, I weave the shadows and disappear from sight. What? So let's look at what it said for the spell effect. The spell allows the rune master to teleport to a nearby location within their line of sight, leaving behind a brief illusion of darkness to confuse their enemies. I love that. I love flavor text. The shadow step spell is a favorite among thieves and assassins, as it allows them to quickly escape pursuit and infiltrate heavily guarded areas. I love that it talks about the entirety of the effect, right? When you think shadow step, you obviously think about a quick teleportation, but this this in-depth representation of nearby location within line of sight, leaves behind a brief illusion. That all really really adds to the flavor of the world you're creating. And I'm in awe of the creativity of this system, and I'm in awe of how much change you can affect with just some little things. So now we're going to regenerate a new one. We've got spell named Stormcall, American English rune names, Thunder, Water, Air. We can probably take away this American English and just call it rune names because we created the runes. A number of runes is 3, relative strength required is high, incantation for activation. With the power of thunder, water, and air, I call upon the storm to unleash its fury. See, I like that this is longer. I might even want to make it even longer. Spell effect, the spell creates a powerful storm, complete with thunder and lightning, heavy rain, and strong winds in the vicinity of the Rune Master. The storm can be used to attack enemies, provide cover for allies, or even create a diversion. Flavor text. The Stormcall spell is one of the most powerful and versatile spells in a Rune Master's arsenal. It can be used for offense or defense, and its effects can be devastating for those caught in its path. I really like it. We haven't seen any. Well, we did see the 1/5 rune before, but we haven't seen any more. I'm really, really interested to see what it comes up portal jump, what it comes up with for some. Ooh, see? Check this out. Its context is so good. Portal jump, it's a space rune, but the strength requirement is going to be high. I'm really interested to see how far it's going to allow us to teleport and what it sees as a high strength. That's really exciting. So with the power of Space Rune, I open a portal to my desired destination. Spell effect opens a magical portal that the caster and others can walk through to be transported to a different location instantly. Flavor text. The portal jump spell is a highly sought after by travelers and traders, as it allows instant teleportation to distant locations. It is, however, only known and mastered by very few, as the strength cost is high and the incantation difficult to master. This one spell could be a huge part of our story, right? It's set it up, and because of the rules we've already created, we have this incredible opportunity here to talk about portal masters, right? Major cities are going to have portal masters. Extremely wealthy families are going to have portal masters. And there's going to be a whole culture behind the portal masters, right? Because the strength requirement is so high. Then anybody who's going to be using the portal jump spell to help others travel is going to have to be able to A, cast the spell, but B, cast it multiple times, potentially in quick succession. So it's actually going to end up being sort of like a train system, where the portals are going to be created at specific intervals by the portal masters in these certain places. So we're going to have to create an idea of, when are they exercising to maintain their strength, right? So they're going to have to be like on a day, off a day, on a day, off a day, or work in extremely small shifts. So maybe smaller towns might have a portal master, but maybe that portal master is only able to create a portal once a day. So if you want to travel out of that town somewhere else, or maybe it's even once a week or once a month, right? The time constraint there could be huge. Or maybe you have to send a letter via carrier pigeon or some other system of magic, right? There can be magical communication across great distances. And you have to, if you're the mayor of a smaller town, you have to send a message to a larger town to get one of their portal masters to come to your town to create a portal. And so you would set up a time, you would get the entire town together or a large portion of the town together, leaving behind
Maybe a contingent of soldiers or something like that to defend the town because you wouldn't want bandits taking the opportunity to come and raid your entire village. But then you would get everybody together and maybe they would go for, a farmer's market day or a market day or whatever it was, and they would just come through the portal, do all of that, and then be portaled back to their city from the main town. But that, I mean, just this one spell creates an insane ecosystem of how travel might be just drastically different in our world. And I'm actually going to save this spell. We're going to do some huge tweaking to it. The activation incantation is going to get a facelift. The spell effect is obviously fairly simple, and I like the flavor text. Yeah, so we're gonna have to work on that activation incantation. I want it to be something special, but we're copying that and we're saving it in our little Notion page. Booyah! Hmm, that's wonderful. Man, I really like that. This is I've been messing around with ChatGPT for a while, um, but I haven't because I didn't really understand what the limitations were for it memorizing things that you said previously in a chat. Um, some of the stuff that I did got really jumbled. It started giving me new names. Sorry, got sidetracked reading something on Discord. But it kept giving new names to characters we'd already created, and then just dropping names when I would tell it to list all the characters we'd created. And then it had told me a story previously that I told it to make canon, and then it forgot the story. And so when I asked it to write the story again, it very, very um, confidently told me a totally different story and said, "This is the story that we created together previously." So it'll just straight up lie to your face, and it forgets everything all the time. So one of the important things if you're going to be doing a project like this, you've got to save important stuff. You've got to get important stuff condensed down, and you've got to be willing to copy paste things into chats and make new chats and really work piecemeal on your story and your world's background. The more stories you write about things that aren't even necessarily, if you're writing a novel or something like that, the more bits of information that you write that aren't necessarily going to be in your novel, but just inform the history of your world, if you can get enough of that information condensed down and put it in the engine that you're going to be using to actually write the story, then you're going to be getting a much, much richer story. And that's one of the big things that I really hope for is the ability for the model to remember more of your chat, right? Because the more information it can remember from its interaction with you, the richer and richer and richer and more collaborative the experience can be. And ultimately, I think we're going to see a lot more quality stuff being put out there because of it. So I'm really excited. I know there's a lot of people out there who are terrified of the AI. They think they're going to take their jobs, and maybe they will. They think, uh, it's theft, it's plagiarism, you're stealing from other creators, and I just have to say that I disagree with all of that. I think as a tool, it is possibly one of the single most important things that people have created, at least in my lifetime, probably in the lifetimes of anybody that's alive right now. It's it's so powerful for helping get what's in your head onto paper. And I'm really excited. I think it's going to do some wonderful things for the creative space. Yeah, so we saved this. I made a note that I want to make some changes to it, and I think I want to edit this a little bit, right? We don't need the American English rune name thing anymore. We can just use rune names. Let's give that a little capital there. And let's have it make us a new spell. No, an error occurred. It's really not liking me trying to edit things. It's really weird. Earthen Bulwark. Alright, we got some new runes in here. Earth and Protection. Number of runes is 2. Relative strength required is medium. Incantation for activation with the power of Earth and Protection. I call upon the ground to defend me. It's created a convention for itself that is continuing even though I keep deleting each spell that it makes, which is interesting to me, but it keeps saying with the power of and the runes it's using. I kind of like that, but it also means that making much shorter incantations is going to be difficult, because if we adhere to this convention, then things like Shadow Step can't be reduced below with the power of Shadow in Space, or with the power of Dark in Space, or whatever the grouping for that was. Um, and so I don't know if I like the convention or not. We'll see. Spell effect: the Rune Master creates a temporary barrier of solid earth that surrounds them, providing protection from incoming attacks. The Earthen Bulwark spell is often used by warriors and guards, as it allows them to quickly create a barrier of solid earth for protection during battle or when defending a location. This is a great spell. I imagine it would be one of those staple spells that everybody has, right? Everybody who's in the military, everybody who's in any way a melee combatant, or bodyguards. This would probably be a. There actually might even be an enhanced version of this that some of the most sought after bodyguards are using. But that's definitely an interesting spell. Invisibility Cloak, Illusion and Aether. Again, relative strength required high. I'm really impressed at how well the AI is determining the balance of the power levels of these, even though they don't necessarily need more runes. I'm really, really happy with how well it's making that association of power. By the power of illusion and aether, I disappear from sight. Spell effect: the spell casts a cloak of invisibility around the target, making them invisible to the naked eye. The invisibility cloak spell is a powerful and a highly coveted spell among thieves and assassins, as it allows them to move unseen and unnoticed. Um, Again, another staple spell. I imagine that no thief or assassin of any quality wouldn't know this spell. So that's super interesting. I really like it. Oh, it's keeping track of these different responses, right? This is response 11 of 11. Can I? Oh my goodness. Oh, that's why it's maintaining the convention. Is because it really does have all of these spells. Interesting. I wonder if this is going to hurt its ability in the future to remember this information that we have up here. I wonder if it's already doing that. Wow. I didn't even know that this was a thing. I'm such a dum-dum. Normally, when I iterate on what it gives me, I give it new information and then just have it rewrite it. I don't use regenerate response very often. And I don't think I'm going to. I don't think this is going to be good for me because I don't want it to be remembering all of this information that it's talking about. I want it to be remembering all of the information that I've given it previously. So this is probably going to mess up this engine. I'm probably going to have to remake this chat because it's not letting me. I think that's why it's not letting me edit this. I think, yeah, see, I did a couple of things to change stuff up here. Oh, it keeps track of all the changes. Hmm. That's interesting. So it's keeping track of all the changes and everything that I've made. I wonder if it memorizes all these changes or if it's just reading the one that's available now, right? Could I go back and ooh, wow, this opens up so much potential and I need to do some testing and I'll probably do it off screen. But if the bot is only remembering the information of what's being shown right now, then it is possible to use the edit button to create cards, right? Like I could copy this spell and paste it into a prompt. And then, hang on. Oh, oh my goodness. Look at this. It even keeps track of everything that came after. Oh my goodness. This is incredible. And it also makes me think that it's probably true that it's only remembering which one of these you have there. So you could create like a book of spells, like a grimoire, inside one of these prompts by editing the prompt over and over again and recopying and pasting different spells on there. And then use that spell as a prompt for different things. You could reprompt fights over and over again. You could reprompt characters with different signature spells. If you were running some sort of a D&D game, you could keep a grimoire um, of the spells of your characters that your player characters, and then spit out flavor text each time the spell is used, so that you're giving a little bit of a different description. And all you have to do is just cycle through, pick the spell. That's ooh, wow, that's wonderful. You can, if you're the GM of a tabletop RPG, you could keep all of your encounters that you had planned in a stack like this. And then when your party encountered one of the encounters, right, you just scroll to that encounter. And then everything that comes after that is locked to that encounter. right? So then you go to the next encounter and you've got this blank space down here, and then you just go through the encounter. Man, that that is absolutely incredible. Sorry, I just saw this, Corin. The new update was just a really small update. It said that it was giving it better ability for factuality and something else. I forgot what it was. I read it hours and hours ago. But the new update was for factuality, which is awesome. I don't know how long you've been in here, but I just discovered something I didn't know about the bot. When you edit prompts, it saves it continues to save the prompt, but not only that, it saves everything that came after the prompt. So you can create multiple trains of thought from the same prompt location and sort of create a branching tree of information inside of a single prompt that you can control what branch you're on based on which one of these prompts you're using. It's absolutely blowing my mind around. Blowing my mind right now. I've totally lost it. I can't believe how strong that is. Just wow. Okay, well now I've got to get back to the correct. Ah, there we are. Okay, that takes me back to the correct one. That's so exciting. I love that it's kept all of these spells that we've created as well. This is really interesting. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to teach everybody I know this. This is, yeah, I didn't know either until just now. It's freaking me out, man. It's such a cool. I don't know if you play any tabletop RPGs or anything like that, but one of the best things I can think of for it is if you have a player character, if you're the game master, or if you are a player character that has spells or effects or anything like that, you could stack them like this by copy pasting them into a specific prompt. And then, oh, okay, so it's interesting. But you could copy paste them into a prompt and stack them as sort of your grimoire or your spell book. And then when you wanted to use it, you could just have a prompt that's going to generate flavor text for you based on the spell that you've selected. And then every time your flavor text is just slightly different. And it's going to give it, it's going to make it feel like it's not just this constant repetition of the same flavor text over and over again. Like if you were going to cast Magic Missile and over again, you're just, I cast Magic Missile and 3 missiles come out of my hands and arc out towards my target, and yeah, that's how that works. Or every single time you could have a little bit new flavor text with, the specifics of the interaction that you're having right then and there going on for every different spell that you have. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. I'm losing my mind. I didn't even realize that it had created this astral projection spell. I want to read that. Aether and space, I like that. Number of runes 2. Relative strength required is high. Incantation for activation. With the power of Aether and space, I call upon my mind to journey beyond the limits of my physical form. I like that. That's a nice incantation. Spell effect. The rune master's mind is separated from their body and can travel to different locations and planes of existence, able to observe and gather information. Flavor text. Astral projection is a powerful spell that allows the rune masters to separate their mind from their body, allowing them to journey to distant places and gather information without physically being there. However, the spell requires a significant amount of strength, and the mind must be strong and well trained to successfully complete the journey. Interesting. Of course, astral projection will be a staple spell. It's going to be, I mean, it's too powerful to be able to spy on people and stuff like that. Kings will always be using it. So in any world where magic exists, you would want something of this nature. And definitely if your world was going to include alternative planes of existence, then would almost be a requirement to have something like this. So let's regenerate a new one. See what else it gives us. Swift Wind. Just the air rune. The relative strength requirement is low. A single rune. The incantation for activation with the power of air. I call upon the winds to carry me swift and true. Again, we really do need to do something about the incantation and activation section here, because while I do like the convention of with the power of air, when it comes to extremely simple spells like this, having to use an incantation that is so long is going to be a real detriment to characters in the story that are going to be trying to use those. Right? If you were in a combat situation and you were going to use a quick little spell like this for movement, you wouldn't want to use an incantation that's this long. It's just not viable. So we're going to have to do something about how it determines what the incantation is. And I think using relative strength as a modifier for the length of the incantation and maybe the set of conventions that the incantation for activation uses is probably going to be the best way we can do that. So something like, if it's a relative strength of low, then the incantation can't be more than 3 words. And if it's medium, then it can't be more than 5 words. And if it's high, then it can be an infinite number of words. And maybe for just really powerful and exceptional spells like the portal spell that we had talked about earlier, you might even have an entire paragraph worth of incantation just for the sake of flavor. But we definitely need to do something about that incantation and activation bit. I don't like that. So the spell effect is the Rune Master is able to increase their speed and agility, allowing them to move quickly and with precision. And flavor text, the Swift Wind spell is a favorite among scouts and thieves as it allows them to move quickly and silently, making them nearly impossible to catch. I really love that it produces such wonderful flavor text and that it makes such good associations. I'm blown away with the limited amount of work that we've done here. How really, really strong it is at becoming a generator for things like spells and information. And I really like that it was so good at creating a story. I don't know if you were here, Corin, but earlier it created a spell for me before I had created all of the individual runes. And I told it to tell me a story about the rune master that had created the spell. And it told this really, really interesting story. So let's go back. Let's use Shadow Step, actually. I love that I can just cycle through this. This is so wonderful. So for the Shadow Step rune, if we wanted to create a story about the person who invented this spell, basically, we can just go in here and say, tell me a story about the creator of Shadow Step. Please give them a name. And then we're just going to see what happens. So once upon a time, there was a young rune master named Leaf. Leaf was born into a family of thieves and had grown up learning the ways of deception and trickery. As he grew older, he became increasingly fascinated by the runes of dark and space and the possibilities they held for stealth and movement. Determined to master the art of Shadow Step, Leaf set out on a journey to learn from the greatest rune masters of his time. He traveled far and wide, studying under wise sages and powerful wizards, learning new incantations and practicing his craft. One day Leaf came across a powerful and reclusive rune master named Ravenna, who was rumored to be able to teleport short distances. Leaf sought her out and begged her to teach him her secrets. Ravenna, impressed Ravenna, impressed by Leif's determination, agreed to take him on as her apprentice. Under Ravenna's tutelage, Leif began to master the art of Shadow Step. He learned to harness the power of the Dark Rune to create illusions and confuse his enemies, and the Space Rune to teleport short distances. He practiced tirelessly, honing his skills until he could perform the spell with ease. With his newfound mastery, Leif returned home to his family of thieves and soon became their leader. He used his skills to guide the thieves in pulling off heists, escaping from pursuers, and infiltrate heavily guarded areas. Word of Leif's ability spread quickly, and soon he was known as the Shadow Step Thief throughout the land. Leif's reputation grew, and he became a legend known for his unparalleled skill in stealth and deception. He eventually retired from thievery and settled down in a quiet place where he taught other young thieves and rune masters the art of Shadow Step. His legacy lives on as many thieves and assassins still use the spell to this day, and the spell he created is widely known as Shadow Step. Um, so what I've been doing is I've just kind of been trying. Oh, you're not here anymore. Sad day. Yeah, so now we don't even actually have to worry about deleting this or anything. We can just boop, boop, move on. And bam, we're back. We can just make a new spell. All right, Aether, Light, and Space called Starfall. Ooh, I like that name. Incantation. With the power of Aether, Light, and Space, I call upon the stars to fall from the sky. Spell effect. A shower of bright, fiery stars rain down upon a designated area, causing heavy damage to any enemies within the area of effect. Flavor text. The Starfall spell is a powerful and devastating spell, often used as a last resort in battle. The falling stars ignite the battlefield, leaving behind nothing but ash and destruction. So very much like a meteor spell, but they just called it Starfall instead. I like that as a flavor. But again, this is probably something where I would like to see the incantation for activation get longer. It seems like an extremely powerful spell, something that you would want a contingent of soldiers protecting the rune master that was casting the skill, and maybe only a few rune masters during any given age would ever even be capable of casting something this devastatingly powerful. So we want the relative strength required metric is not quite good enough. I might want to have it do something like between 1 and 100, and then maybe create some rules for how many spells or how likely it is to create a spell of a 100 strength requirement versus 1, so we get more of the little spells and less of the extremely powerful spells. But I think that's probably going to be all for the stream today. We've done a lot with this generator. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm excited to create more generators like this when we continue creating our world. You're going to be able to create characters really easily this way, spells really easily this way, and then by combining those things, right? If you put a character and a spell together into a different chat with the basic rules of the world also pasted in, then you could generate some great stories about the people who use these spells as sort of their signature spell. Um, so we're really going to flesh out this world. This isn't something that I'm going to create as like a novel or a series of novels or something like that. The purpose of this is to discover a world as we create the world, right? I want to know all of the bullshit stories about the history. I want to know all of the stories that are going on right now. I want to know about each of the characters, and I want to know about those characters' interactions with each other. It's something that is sort of never ending, right? Because the world can go back for as long as you want, it can go forward for as long as you want, and there's an infinite number of interactions that can happen between each and every single character that you ever create with the system. And I love the idea of being able to interact with the world as I'm building it and interact with the stories on a really, really personal level. I think this is a lot of fun. Um, so I will probably stream again tomorrow. So if you have a chance, stop by, help me make some decisions about how we're building this world.